So I'm Councillor James Lewis, leader of Leeds City Council and chair of this committee. And welcome to the meeting this afternoon. I thought I'd give it 5 minutes in case people got caught up in the rain or if anything else is going on at the moment. So I'm going to turn to the agenda. Welcome everybody. Just a couple of practical things for our turn to the agenda. First of all, we've got very strict instructions that we have to sit on the seat with our name on for the live stream. So I know it means we're a bit oddly spread out around the room for people here, but that's for the technology. And secondly, again, for the cameras and the webcast, now we are part of the entertainment business as well as a committee of a combined authority. Could you make sure you use the microphones when we speak and turn it off when you've finished speaking? That means that the webcast is clear who's speaking. Okay, I will turn to the top of the agenda, and apologies please, Jeanette.
Apologies have been received from Councillor Imran Khan, Councillor Andrew Waller, Councillor Graham Turner, Ola Hunt, Claire Paxman, Michelle Chappell-Dixon, Tim Craven, Peter O'Brien and Colin Booth.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to item 2, which is a declaration of disclosable pecuniary interests. I always have a little bit of small print to read at this point, which is the committee will be asked to make recommendations related to the adult education budget for decision by the combined authority and by the chief executive of the combined authority under his delegations from the board. Therefore, in the interests of transparency, all members of the committee with an interest, including local authorities and colleges, should declare it at this point, and then everybody will be able to participate in the discussion. So I shall start, and Leeds City Council is a provider of services funded by adult education budget. I'll walk around the room.
Calderdale Council is also a provider under the budget.
Sorry, I'll work around the room. That's probably the easiest way of doing it. Lynn, please.
Yeah, Wakefield Council is a provider.
Thank you.
NAVCHO and Chair of West Yorkshire Consortium of Colleges is definitely a provider.
Thank you. Anybody else?
James, I'm not sure whether I should declare this, but I'm just signing an agreement with the combined authority for a skills worker with the TC. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Anybody else?
Leeds City Council is a provider with this budget.
Thank you. On to item 3, which is exempt information. Appendix 1 of agenda item 10 is exempt as it includes data regarding the adult education budget, which we can't publish ahead of the Department for Education publishing it. So in practical terms, that information is available to the committee, and if we get into a detailed discussion of that, we will have to take the meeting below the line. If we don't get onto the data in the appendix, we'll obviously continue that discussion above the line. I hope that is straightforward enough. And I'm going to move on to item 4, the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of July 2022. And I take it everybody is happy with those. At the last meeting, we asked the West Yorkshire Skills Partnership for an update on how providers they put forward were representative diverse. I'm going to ask Nav to give us an update at this point, please, on the minutes item.
Well, we still continue as a partnership of the willing. If people are interested in becoming involved, they just need to approach myself or the West Yorkshire Consortium of Colleges. We are looking for a broad remit, so the idea of individual partners coming and not representing a group of partners is quite difficult to deal with. But at the same time, I think that if someone's willing to give up their time, then we're likely to take them. But people do have to realise that they're representing a group rather than an individual provider.
Thanks, Nav. That's really helpful on that item. The other item on the minutes was the local skills improvement plans for West Yorkshire. The West Yorkshire and North Yorkshire Chamber of Commerce and the Mid Yorkshire Chamber of Commerce have been chosen to lead the local skills improvement plan. And it's really welcome they want to work with us on that. I'm going to write and ask both chambers if they want to be represented on this committee. I think that's a logical thing to do. So I will keep the committee updated on that. Is there anything else from the last set of minutes that we need to bring here now? No, okay, we'll move on to item 5, which is the evidence report, please, and I'll ask Peter Glover to present that report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm hoping that Josh is going to bring up the slides for me. Oh, thank you. So the purpose of this item is really to provide context to the rest of the discussion by giving an overview of the condition of the local labour market. And within that, we're looking at 2 sets of indicators. So first of all, we've got the state of the region indicators, which are pertinent to the employment and skills agenda. And just a reminder that state of the region is a sort of annual stock take of West Yorkshire's sort of socio-economic performance. And we'll be publishing the 2022 report shortly. Now, actually, we've gone through the majority of these indicators in previous meetings, and our approach is sort of to report by exception. So I'm not going to dwell on the indicators that we've already covered. But we'll quickly go through them. But the second set of indicators are more timely indicators, which we present alongside some national data to provide sort of context around the current situation. And these timely indicators, I think, are particularly useful in view of the volatile current economic situation, including the cost of living crisis that has emerged in recent months. Can you move on, please? Yeah, so we covered that there. If you can scroll on a couple. Yeah, next one, please. So one fresh indicator under state of the region, remember these are the high level indicators that we report by exception, is around employment levels. And obviously that's a key measure of interest to the committee. One of the limitations of this data is at local level, it's based on 12-month averages, so it's not giving it as timely a picture as we might like. The latest figures are for July 2021 to June 2022. But this is effectively the official measure of employment for the local area. And the positive news is at the time that the data was collected, the number of people and the proportion of the working age population, the number of people in employment and the proportion of the working age population in employment were both recovering from the pandemic. So 74% of people in the working age population now in employment, and that's 1,072,000 people in absolute terms in West Yorkshire. But what you can see from the chart is that the rate and the level are both below the peaks that we saw before the pandemic. So not all the ground's been recovered. And the employment rate, which is the black line for West Yorkshire, the gap with the yellow line, which is the England average, has expanded somewhat. So we have come out, based on this data, we've come out of the pandemic in a slightly worse relative position. But the overall trend is upwards. So I'm going to skip through a few of the slides now because we've covered these in previous meetings. But what I would say is if anybody based on the pack has got any questions on any of them, I'm happy to cover that. So if you could scroll forward, please. Next one, please. Yeah, okay. This is some new data. Back one, please. Sorry. It's not a very elegant way of going through the slides. But this is also new data and it relates to the official measure of unemployment in West Yorkshire. And as we'll see in a moment, we'll look at some of the national data. Unemployment is at record lows nationally. Again, though, for West Yorkshire, we're looking at 12-month average data. But you can see there that West Yorkshire is quite close to the national average. So 4.2% unemployment rate in West Yorkshire, 3.9% nationally. And what that suggests, and which is a theme we'll come on to in a moment, is we've got a tight labour market in West Yorkshire at the moment. So relatively low levels of unemployment and, as we'll see, quite high levels of vacancies. If we can scroll on a few now, please, Josh, because we're covering things that we've had before. If there's any questions based on what you've got in your pack, happy to cover them. Keep going, please. In fact, to the next section, please. Right, so this next section is the more timely indicators I'm going to spend most of the time on. And I think it's useful just to look at some of the national context, because the data here is a lot more timely and more detailed. And I think most of it is applicable to a West Yorkshire context, so it gives us an idea of what's happening at West Yorkshire level. So first of all, employment has actually fallen slightly in the latest quarter for which we have data. So it's down to it's down to 75.5% employment rate, and it's around 320,000 below pre-pandemic levels nationally. So employment's not recovered fully nationally. But one positive aspect is self-employment is now showing signs of recovering. It's still 15% lower than it was before the pandemic, but it grew by 1% during the quarter, whereas the number of employees actually declined. Turning to that point about unemployment on the next bullet point, we now have the lowest official rate of unemployment since 1974 at 3.5%. And we, at the same time, we have 1.2 million vacancies in the labour market, and that's slightly down from the peak levels we saw early in the year, but it's still near record levels. Private sector vacancies have fallen slightly, but public sector vacancies are growing strongly. So we've got a ratio of unemployed people to vacancies that is lower than 1 now. So 0.9 unemployed people per vacancy. So what that suggests is simply not enough people to fill the jobs that are available. So it's one of the tightest labour markets in history at the current time. The situation could change. And that tight labour market is reflected in strong growth in pay. So in cash terms, in nominal terms, year-on-year growth in pay was 6% in the latest quarter. There is a divergence between private sector and public sector though. So public sector pay only increased by 2% in cash terms. But even if you look at the overall 6% growth, that still represents a 2% fall in real terms when you factor in inflation. So in real terms, pay is falling, particularly in the public sector. One of the key issues that we are probably all aware of at the moment is around people leaving the labour force entirely, people of working age. So economic inactivity increased during this latest quarter by 0.6 percentage points to nearly 22%. So that's 1.4 points higher than the pre-pandemic. But that increase this quarter is the highest on record in inactivity. So people are leaving the labour force in large numbers. 3/4 of those people are old people, but there's also a big rise in people who are inactive due to long-term health conditions. So what we can see from the data is the rates of chronic illness have shot up during the pandemic and they're continuing to climb. And there are lots of people who are suffering multiple health conditions. So that is a big issue in terms of increasing the labour supply. It includes people who wait for treatment, just general poorer health post-pandemic, long COVID, also employers and their role in bringing people into the labour force. So I think that gives a good picture of the national context. Next slide, please, Josh. But drilling down into some of the local level indicators, which give us quite a timely picture of what's happening, we've got figures around sort of employee count based on HMRC real-time data. And the positive thing about that is it shows the number of employees in Wissiosh is still growing. So in the latest period, between August and September, nearly 3,000 extra employees added to that count, which is slightly above national average growth rate. So we've got about 30,000 people, net additional people in employment compared with pre-pandemic. So the employment picture at the moment is still looking relatively positive. Next slide, please, Josh. If you look at the claimant count, which is a measure of the number of people who are claiming benefit because they're out of work, that was in steady decline from early 2021 onwards, but that decline has now stalled. So we've had, from the period to June to September, it's remained virtually static. So that might be a sign of sort of early problems in the labour market. And the count still remains 23% or 13,000 higher than it was pre-pandemic in February 2022. February 2020. Next slide, please. And this should give you the picture at local authority level. You can see the same trend there. So looking at key points in time here, pre-pandemic, peak unemployment in March 2022-21, and then the last 3 months. And you can see the decline stalled across all of the local authorities. Another factor to bear in mind is that recovery in terms of the claimant count has been slower in Bradford and Leeds. So in Bradford, the claimant count is still 31% higher than it was before the pandemic, and it's 28% higher in Leeds, which is higher than the other local authorities. Next slide, please, Josh. So turning more to the demand side and what's happening with vacancies, we don't have the official statistics at local level that I referred to previously, so we rely on an analysis of online job postings to get a picture of vacancies. And this chart shows you the trend in total postings over time in West Yorkshire. So what you can see from that is that the count of postings fell to an extent between August and September, in both August and September. But what you can also see is that level of postings overall remains very high in historic terms. So there are still lots of vacancies out there. So there are 4,600 new postings recorded in September 2022. That's 27% higher than the previous year, September of the previous year, and well above pre-pandemic levels. Not clear how sustainable this level of recruitment demand is likely to be, because we've got the cost pressures on businesses that are emerging now, and also the declining consumer confidence, which are likely to have an impact. Next slide, please. And this slide shows you that job postings analysis for selected for a more recent period at local authority level. There are some differences at local authority level. So if we look at the picture from January to September 2022, the number of postings in Leeds fell by about a third. So Leeds has not performed as well as the other local authorities that we're presenting data for here. Unfortunately, we've got technical issues for Calderdale, so we can't present that. But the other local authorities have actually grown between January and September. So there are some differences there, but all of the local authorities have seen some degree of decline in job postings between August and September. Next slide, please. And so this final one, which is a little bit difficult to see, this looks at the analysis of postings by occupational categories. And again, it shows a slightly mixed and volatile picture. There are a couple of occupational categories that have seen growth in the last few months. So information technology, education and training grew in September compared with the previous month. But the majority of occupational areas have seen reductions recently of varying sizes, but the ones that have seen the biggest reductions are finance and then hospitality, food and tourism have seen reductions quite recently, although this in most cases still quite high in historic terms. So that's a brief summary of the evidence. Back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Are there any questions on Peter's report, please? Sylvia, please. Councillor Dacre.
Thank you, Chair. So Councillor Sylvia Dacre from Calderdale. It's not so much a question really, but you say that, or your chart shows that the online job postings are going down and slightly, and conversations in Calderdale with SMEs, which is mostly what we have, do indicate a lot of people saying that they expect to be making redundancies over the winter, and so my officers are saying to me, anything that you get that's starting to happen, they'd be interested to know. But they expect it to start happening in the next few months.
Yeah, so there's a bit of a time lag, I think, between those intentions and what we actually see in the recorded data. I mean, we can look at the data on a sort of weekly basis as well. It doesn't point conclusively to a kind of downturn yet, because the figures are still really high in historic terms, in terms of the recruitment activity that's taking place. If you look at, there are national figures available on redundancies, so based on survey data of whether employees are making redundancies, that hasn't really increased yet. So I think it's very much it's a sort of lagging indicator. I don't think we'll know for a few weeks or maybe a couple of months how much of a downturn we're likely to experience. I mean, the labour market still looks strong at the moment, but as I mentioned in the report, I don't think that's not sustainable in terms of, the tightness of the labour market and the increases in pay that we're seeing, even though they're being offset by inflation. So, yeah, I think we just need to continue to, we do produce a regular insights report as well that, and we can provide more regular sort of feedback on what's happening to local authorities in terms of that sort of labour market picture.
Thank you, Peter. Bill, please.
Thanks, Chair. First couple of slides show kind of a strong growth really in terms of people in work, and then you start hitting, you know, one or two obstacles in saying, but there's still all these vacancies. Is there any, I mean, it's a speculative question really, is there any data to say how many people, how many of those people who are in work, because we're saying there's record people in work, how many of those are actually also receiving state benefits because of the pay levels?
So what we do know, we do have figures for universal credit, and there are about 230,000 people who claim universal credit in West Yorkshire. I think 38% of those are in employment. So, you know, a big chunk of people are in a job that doesn't pay sufficiently to sort of support them, support their household. So you have got large numbers of people who are, you know, can't make ends meet through work at the moment. That number has actually increased. So the overall number of people on universal credit hasn't really increased in the last year, but the number of people who are employed and on universal credit has grown, I think, by about 4%. So you see, we are seeing growing numbers in that sort of regard.
Thank you. Sharon, please.
Yeah, just picking up the points around economic inactivity, and we've talked a lot about that around the Shared Prosperity Fund, I think, and as a department, it's something that we're really interested in because of the kind of anomaly with the number of people who are unemployed and the number of vacancies that are out there. And although if I'm understanding the data correctly, you've got reference to long-term sickness. Am I right in thinking that's 4 weeks or more? Or is there more longevity to that? Because if it is, because we don't interface with those customers and we don't interact with them, but 4 weeks isn't a long time if you talk about a long-term sick absence.
So the data I presented is based on the labour force survey, where people are actually asked, you know, it's a household survey where people are asked, you know, about their recent sort of pattern of behaviour in the labour market. So that the people who are inactive due to health reasons, they would have been asked, you know, what's your economic status? And the answer would have been, I'm not in a job, I'm not currently looking for a job, or I'm not currently available for a job. And the reason for that is long-term health. So it wouldn't necessarily be long-term sickness or various health reasons. So that wouldn't necessarily be, you know, categorised in terms of the duration in that context. What they do ask about is the nature of the illness or health condition. So lots of mental health problems, a big surge in that. So, and it surged during the pandemic and the immediate aftermath. It's still growing. And also people with sort of cardiovascular conditions as well. But I think an important point is a lot of people have got 2 or 3 health conditions in combination as well. And I think the point I alluded to is obviously we've got long waiting lists in the health service, so that's all backing up in terms of labour supply. But overall we've got, we're talking about a reduction of 500,000 people compared with pre-pandemic in the labour force. And if you worked out what it would have been if the labour force had continued to grow at the same rate as it did pre-pandemic, that might be 1 million people, a 1 million people deficit in the labour force.
And just to add, I think it's really important as an area that we look at how we're trying to re-engage with those people in a variety of ways. You know, in small, you know, steps to get them closer to the labour market and back engaging with us in Job Centre Plus, because we won't interact with them where they are currently. But there's some fantastic opportunities out there, isn't there? And it's just, we just don't want to lose sight of them, and they're too valuable to our labour force, aren't they?
Thanks, Sharon. Would anybody else like to come in on this item, please? Nav, please.
Just to emphasise that lack of people, I suppose, I think the colleges and I think to a certain extent the private providers are offering a wide range of apprenticeships at the moment that aren't getting enough applicants. So for the first time we've got good jobs with supportive training behind it, and there aren't enough people coming forward.
I mean, just to comment on that, so in the pack there is a chart around apprenticeship take-up. So the latest full year figures show apprenticeship starts down by 23% in West Yorkshire compared with pre-pandemic. The the provisional figures we've got for 21-22 academic year up to Q3 show that the numbers have recovered by 11% year on year, but that's still well short of what they were pre-pandemic, so it's still more than 10% down.
But I think the numbers being offered would show an increase if they could all be filled, I suppose, is the point. I mean, it's just extra information that adds to the points you're making.
Thanks, Nav. Anybody else who would like to come in on this item? No, that's great. Thank you, Peter. And we'll move on to item 6, which is the update on current programmes, please, Michelle.
Okay, thank you very much. So you paper that summarises activity on all of the programmes which this committee oversees, funded through a myriad of sources. The first thing I wanted to draw your attention to is the performance to date across all of those programmes collectively, which are summarised at 2.1, and which kind of group the activity together. So you'll be aware that co-funded by the Careers and Enterprise Company, we have a team of people who work with schools and colleges to support the careers destinations of predominantly of our most disadvantaged young people by helping those institutions to make progress towards the Gatsby benchmarks of good careers guidance. Of the 181 schools that we work with, 56 have already made measurable improvement towards those good careers benchmarks. We've set a very stretching target for all 181 to make positive improvements this year. And we are on track to achieving that. So we're very pleased with the progress that's being made so far this year. The next area is around careers campaigns. So supporting people of all ages in West Yorkshire to understand the career opportunities available to them and the routes to accessing those, which is predominantly what we're looking at here is through the Future Goals All Age Careers website. Over 1 million engagements so far. As we've got quite a high profile campaign out at the moment and promoting some of our adult skills provision, we would anticipate that going up quite significantly over the next few weeks and months. Moving on to businesses supported to engage with employment and skills programmes. We've set a target for the year of 266, mainly supported through funded courses, particularly our ESF funded Skills for Growth programme. We're reporting 82 supported so far, but we're not helped by the timing of this meeting being just a couple of weeks before our next quarterly reporting deadline. So would anticipate that's increasing significantly at our next deadline in November. And then the number of individuals supported, you can see that really what we're able to do to support people and our offer for individuals around employment, training and self-employment has increased massively. You know, we're talking about quite huge numbers since the devolution of the adult education budget. So of our annual target of just over 62,000 was supported nearly 16,000 so far this year to upskill, retrain or to access employment and self-employment. And I just wanted to stay on that point about adult support for adults, particularly in the context of the data that we've just seen from Peter. So we have 30 fully funded retraining courses for adults currently being promoted through Skills Connect. 30 courses now available online, either for individuals to sign up to or to register their interest. Those are across a number of sectors, including health and care, digital and construction, very much targeted at addressing some of those labour shortages we've just been hearing about, but also our messaging is very much geared towards supporting people to access better paid, more secure employment. Again, the messages that we've just been talking about. And of course, the employment hubs, which are delivered in partnership with our 5 West Yorkshire local authorities, support people to find the right training for them to progress into work. And having that, I think we've it's certainly been hammered home to us over the last few years with the kind of uncertainty we've seen in the labour market, how important it is to have that offer there to support people as the labour market changes to return if redundancies do increase. As Councillor Dacre was talking about, we will have that support there, working in partnership with the local authorities to help people to find retraining and alternative work. And finally, as Bill mentioned earlier, since the papers were produced, the Combined Authority has entered into a contract with Trade Yorkshire and Humber to fund to test the effectiveness of the union learning model in stimulating demand for adult training. So we'll be monitoring that in terms of supporting particularly people with low skill levels and in low paid work, stimulating demand for adult training, including the adult education budget, level 3, free courses of jobs provision, skills connect, multiply, apprenticeships, because we've got a really strong offer to people. We need to make sure that using the union learning representative model, we're stimulating that demand from the adults that really need that provision. And the TUC will recruit a skills development officer to deliver that work in the coming weeks and months.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Are there any questions or comments on the report, please? Alex, please.
Hiya, yeah, just on the Gatsby improvements, how are you measuring that? How are you measuring that they've improved? Have you got somebody? So it's their self-assessment of improvements. And on the businesses that are engaged, the Skills for Growth programme, can you just remind me what that Skills for Growth programme offer is?
Of course, yeah. So the number we're collecting now is from across a number of programmes, including Connect, where it might be commissioning courses specifically for an employer. But the largest number absolutely comes through the Skills for Growth programme, which is an ESF co-funded programme which supports employers to engage with the full breadth of the education system. So that's done through a diagnostic approach. So working with an employer to understand why they want to engage with education, which is the education training system really, which is the right bit of the system in order to help address their needs. Whether that's about raising awareness of their brand, whether it's about corporate social responsibility, creating a talent pipeline. There could be so many reasons, couldn't there, why an employer wants to engage with education. And through a diagnostic approach, the team develops an engagement plan. So we're not pushing a particular bit of the system, but the solution could be around engaging with early years, primary, secondary, FE, apprenticeships, traineeships. It's, the breadth of the offer is huge, isn't it? Of course,
Yeah. So we've just been allocated some funding from the department to engage with SMEs to encourage them to take up apprenticeships. So we've got West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire. So I just don't want there to be super duplication or bombarding of businesses. So maybe if I can link up with whoever's running that Skills for Growth work, so we can have some kind of united messages and tag team, I guess.
Thank you so much for the offer. Yes, we'd love you to brief the team if that's okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Would anybody else like to come in on this item, please? I don't see anybody. The recommendation we have is that we note and comment on the progress of delivery of the programmes, and I think we've done that, so we're happy to agree that. And we'll move on to item 7, which is the adult education budget update, please. And Lindsay, would you like to lead this item?
Thank you, Chair. Before we start on the matter of the paper, I think we're very conscious that when we talk about the adult education budget, there's a tendency to go straight into the technical and think about the data. And one of the things that we wanted to do is, we really do want to be focusing on the impact this one has on individuals. And one of the things we have been working on is some case studies that really demonstrate that. So if it's okay, we're just going to pause discussion, and hopefully on screen soon there will be a case study for us to watch.
I moved to Halifax in 2016. My husband found here a job and we came together. At first, I remember I was shaking, stressed, and depressed because I had no friends, no family here, and of course, like different. But I think the problem was a different language, English language. So I to immerse myself into a different culture, and I became a waitress. First of all, I decided to learn basic grammar rules. So even when customers like ask me like, can we get more information about this thing? I was like, how to answer this question? So I had no English language at all. At that time, I thought that I will be all stressed. I will, yeah, I that all my life. But once everything changed, Charles and Camilla, they visited Halifax, and just happened, they came to Borough Market. Prince Charles said something like, good luck, don't be afraid of moving forward. And his words, they really inspired me. So, and I decided to try something new. Came to open events, and of course, ECC course, different level 1, entry 1, pre-entry. But okay, I'm here, you know, so we have like different students, and maybe it's the right course for me. I decided to prepare myself properly for this course. I started to read English books, English TV, I went to English museums and galleries as well. I think it was my second lesson. My teacher, so she gave me shell test, and this test I resolved unexpected, and she moved me straight away to GCSE level, and I was like, oh my! So yeah, it was shocking but interesting as well. And even with my lack of confidence, my GCSE teacher, so she created this amazing environment, and she evoked this sense of belonging in the classrooms, and amazing. I finished this course with distinction, and I left inspired, and I decided to continue like exploring this amazing English language, and I became a teacher, English teacher. So first of all, I started to work at a very rich online company, and after a couple of I decided to return to the play. Amazing opportunity to be myself, to be the person who I always meant to be, and I returned to Calderdale College. For students who consider studying at Calderdale College or at any college, so just be curious, be inspired. When I came in the United Kingdom without English language at all. I'm here too, so just don't be afraid of moving forward.
So apologies for the technical snagging there, but hopefully the audio was there and really does, I think, bring home some of the messaging and the impact that this kind of fund can have on individuals. I promise you the video is synced perfectly to the audio, and you can the appendix that provided case study materials does have a link to the website so that you can watch this one, and there is another available, and we're hoping to continue to work with a partnership to develop more and more of these and utilise social media platforms to get these out, to really get the message out about the funding and what it can achieve. So in terms of the paper, the report outlines performance. We won't go into the data unless specifically queried for what Councillor Lewis has mentioned. We're now 3 months into the delivery of Year 2. Next week we will finally get the final data pack that will demonstrate everything that has been delivered and achieved in Year 1, and that's going to be compiled into an end of year report that we will bring back to the next meeting. So we really look forward to having that full year's worth of information to really properly go into the performance and the impact of the fund in our next meeting. In terms of Year 2, as is normal for the sector, we're still awaiting returns from our grant providers, but we've seen a really strong start in terms of engagement from our independent training providers. They're already ahead of their engagement profiles, which is great to see, and a different picture to where we were this time last year. We've introduced the new flexibilities that were discussed at length at the last meeting, and we're also undertaking the community learning review, which again is bringing forward some really great information about the impact of some of the work and some of the things that we might want to consider that fund achieves. Again, hopefully we'll be bringing that back to the next meeting as well. In terms of the paper's request of this committee, it's for a discussion item, and just to outline that, it's outlined in the paper, but I suppose just as a recap, we've had a lot of discussion, and we've received a letter from the College Consortium and supported by Yorkshire Learning Providers about a request and an increase in the AUB funding rate. There are two calls for this increase, and one is that AUB as a funding rate hasn't increased in 10 years, and the overall budget has fallen in that time. And again, as we've discussed, the current economic situation is dramatically increasing operating costs. The position of the Combined Authority is that we absolutely support an increase in adult learning in skills funding, and that is very much in line with Future Ready Skills Commission. The Mayor has already written to the Minister of Education in line with this, and is positive about using her role as the M10 chair to lobby nationally on that basis. However, I suppose that there is within that dynamic the fact that this is a very national problem. It isn't a West Yorkshire problem. And we do feel that additional funding is needed in order to support a rate increase for AUB. Otherwise, ultimately, our AUB pot is a finite pot. Therefore, fewer learners would be supported if we were trying to. So, for example, a 10% increase in the rate would mean that 5,000 fewer residents would be supported through the fund. There is also wider work going on within the Combined Authority, which is considering the impacts of the rising costs of living across businesses and people, programmes and all projects. So we've obviously feeding this conversation into that piece of work. However, given that this is a devolved fund, it's absolutely appropriate to bring this conversation here for discussion that can inform any action that the Combined Authority is deemed to need to take. So I'll pass back to the Chair.
Thank you for that introduction, Lindsay. And I turn to the committee for any comments on the report and the specific thing in the papers. We've been asked to comment as well around the AEB funding rates. Nav, please.
I've been principal of Shipley College for 13 years, up until last summer. That coincides with the age of austerity for those people with memories. I've outlasted several prime ministers. If I'd known a few more months, I'd have got a few more under my belt as well. So in a sense, I feel a bit strange because I am representing the colleges, but I'm not directly part of it anymore. So that's 12 years without an increase. There has been inflation over the last 10 years. Might not have been as great as recent times, but there has been inflation. And this is inflation on top of inflation. There has been no rise in that time. I absolutely understand that if we increase the rate per learner, we will reduce the number of learners that are being supported in West Yorkshire. I take it on, it's a strong point, but my big but would be we want the providers in West Yorkshire to be first class, and I think they're penny pinching now because they haven't got enough money to pay for the delivery that they've got. There's been a suggestion that this is a national problem, and therefore we should wait for a national solution. I think by the time we get national leadership on this, it's quite a long way down the road because I don't think anyone's going to be thinking about AB. It might be very important to us as providers, but in terms of a government, it's not going to become a major issue for 2-3 years, even though this is the hallmark. This is how you increase productivity across the country, and I can see nothing happening but adult provision getting worse if we don't increase the rate. I thought the whole point of decentralisation of funds was so that we could take a lead. Sadly, London have taken the lead. They have introduced a 5% increase. I'd like to see West Yorkshire at the front of that as well, and not waiting for Whitehall to deliver an answer.
Thank you, Nav. Councillor Dacre, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, my officer said to me that they supported an increase in the rates. And they're saying other devolved areas have benefited from increasing the rates, but how do they if the overall envelope that they got hasn't increased? They must surely only be doing that, as you said, by reducing the number of people helped. So I think the real need is just for bigger budgets in it, isn't it? Not. I mean, it's lovely to see that from Calderdale. That's absolutely brilliant. And can we send a copy of it to every government minister? I know we'd probably have to change it after you got it, because that just demonstrates exactly why it's so important, because that's somebody who was a waitress and is now a teacher. It's just unanswerable, the case, isn't it? But so I think, and we are in ESOL in particular, like everybody else, I imagine, in West Yorkshire, we're seeing a big rise in the demand for it. And that's only going to carry on. So I think we'd like rates to go up, but personally, I think the actual overall envelope's more important almost than the rates. Thanks.
Thank you. Alex, please.
Yeah, a couple of things. In NEFI, we're struggling to keep staff, you know, the retention of staff, the recruitment of staff, the sustainability of staff, and that will have a knock-on effect to the quality of the provision that's being delivered, which will have a knock-on effect to the amount of people we can support, because people are going to be leaving the sector, particularly those kind of more tech, high-level skills. Therefore, our AEB offer is going to become very generic and very kind of, you know, borderline, not what, you know, is what we're aspiring for our. So yes, there is the argument of the number of learners, but without decent quality providers and colleges, and without the staff that we can't currently retain on current levels, because they're going back to industry, the offer is going to become diluted, too generic, that it is going to have a knock-on effect. And I don't think we should dismiss it as easy as, well, that's 5,000 less people. If those 5,000 people are getting a really poor service and really, you know, poor provision, then it's not good enough anyway, is it? We don't just want to deliver, you know, average learning to people in West Yorkshire. And then the other bit, I know, again, kind of off the back of what Nav said, yes, there is a waiting for a national response. Yes, it's national. West Mids and GM, Manchester are also asking for a increase in their Devo, so we know more than London are requesting it and getting it. But the skills minister did say during the party conference that she is not a fan of devolution. She doesn't rate the mayors, and until she can see devolution having more impact, there'll be no more money. Now, we don't know how long that skills minister will be around for, do we? But I think waiting for a national solution is not really the answer we need at a local level. And in terms of the private providers, we're going to be losing more private providers in the next 12 months than I think we have done in the last 10 years. So that really, really is going to have a knock-on effect to the quality of the teaching, not just for AEB, but for all the other programmes and offers, and that plethora of funding that we do support across West Yorkshire. So I don't think it is as flippant as, well, we'll lose 5,000 learners. I think it needs to have more weight to it than that, I think.
Thank you, Alex. Would anybody else like to come in? Councillor Masterman, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to echo what's been already said, really, it's our view, and the officers at Wakefield, that devolution should allow us to make a local decision rather than waiting for a national decision on this, and we should be forcing that issue. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. I see Lindsay wants to come in. I'll just see if anybody else would like to come in before I bring Lindsay in. No, looks like it's your turn, Lindsay, please.
I think it was just to absolutely pick up on Alex's point there, because that is part of the conversation about devolution, which is about the impact that we have on residents. And I absolutely take your point that if we only talk about learner numbers, we potentially could be criticised about the position of devolution, and absolutely that isn't the picture. It is about, and devolution is about increasing the impact that this funding has on our residents. So I just think it's a really important point that as a committee that it is that impact that we focus on in terms of what the investment is achieving. So thank you for that point.
Thank you. Somebody else want to come in? I don't see anybody else wanted to come in, so I think our ask today is to comment on it, and I think we've got a very clear steer around the table to consider the impact of what we hope to achieve with the adult education budget, and not just consider it just in learner numbers in taking that work forward. I don't know, Lindsay or Michelle, if you want to sort of give us what the next steps would be on that, given we're not a decision maker on adult education budget here, please.
Thank you. Yes, that would be great. Would the committee like officers to work up some options, which would therefore come to you for comment and then go to the combined authority for a decision?
I'm seeing lots of nodding heads around the table, so we'll take that forward, and obviously we'll note particularly the comments that Nav and Alex made around the quality of provision, the numbers provision. Bill, would you like to come in, please?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think that'd be a really good idea, because I'm sat down here and hearing that, I think we're all agreed that devolved budgets are good. We should be, I'm not sure the government's got the devolved structure right for this kind of activity, whether it's too broken up, we've got too many mayors, is it small, is the authority too small, should we have a bigger budget that covers a region? I'm not sure whether we've got that right, but some kind of data around what's happening in the colleges, because my feedback from people who work in the colleges is that pay is at an all-time low, that people are leaving the sector because they can get more working in a supermarket than they can get teaching people. I had a guy on who's doing some work in one of the colleges who's on £11 an hour teaching people English. And so the situation is horrendous in the colleges, and I'm not kind of having a go at the principal, who'd be a college principal in these times when you've, as Nav said, you've had a massive cut, and you're trying to balance Peter and Paul, and all the time the quality being delivered for what really is a demand which is growing in terms of quality is sliding. So I'm not sure. I'd like to know what the impact is in colleges around West Yorkshire, and what that's doing in terms of economic activity, because there's so many people, we have so many vacancies, but we've got loads of people who can't fill those vacancies because they don't have the skills. That's one of the big issues, I think, that is holding the West Yorkshire back. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. I think I'll come back as part of any options on it. Now to see you wanted to come in again, please.
Yeah, just on that point about losing staff because of wages. Any increase in the AEB rate would stay in West Yorkshire, because it would go straight to wages for staff. It is embarrassing when, as college principals, you pay £11 an hour. I have no disrespect to other people getting paid £11 an hour, but £11 an hour for a professional job that involves all sorts of demands. The current full-time lecturer earns about 10,000 less than a primary school teacher. Again, no disparaging of primary school teachers, but I just think further education deserves better funding. We have the tools at our disposal as a region to add to some of that, and that would increase the lives of West Yorkshire residents, including those that are teachers, because we're not paying them enough.
Thanks, Nav. Would anybody else like to come in on this item, please? Okay, I'm going to, the recommendations for this item are that we are to discuss and comment which we have done, and as Michelle said, officers will come back with some firmer proposals based on our discussion. And of course, clearly, Mayor Braben will continue her work at the M10 group on petting for a national option, although I share the views around the table. We probably won't be getting a lot of action on that for a long time. I think those of us who are providers, councillors around the table will know the number of things we're waiting for national action on at the moment. So we'll move forward on that basis. Great, thank you, Lindsay. And I think you're presenting our next report on Multiply as well, please.
Thank you, Chair. The Multiply paper just provides a summary of the current position. As the committee is aware, Multiply is part of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. It's £12.4 million for West Yorkshire, spread across, I'm going to say 2.5 years as opposed to 3, because the clock has already started ticking. The paper outlines the 3 strands of activities that we've consulted with the sector and providers and stakeholders with over the summer, and we will be focusing certain activity on individuals, to businesses, and also capacity building for the sector. I think recognising that the infrastructure within the sector does need some support. The decision has been taken to at combined authority level to align Multiply to the adult education budget. The target group for Multiply is adults who don't have a GCSE equivalent of numeracy, and that is exactly the same target group as AEB, so it's really important that we align the 2 streams together and make sure that Multiply wraps around adult education budget and it reaches further and goes into the places that the adult education budget can't currently. So in terms of where we are, the grant agreement, our investment plan has been approved by Department for Education, and we have now signed the grant agreement. We're currently working up the detailed implementation plans on those different work streams, and the first out, and we're hoping this will be out in grant agreements early next month, will be with the local authorities who have been working hard to create commissioning plans on a local level and make sure that we're engaging with voluntary and community sector to deliver to individuals who are furthest from the labour market and obviously in our more disadvantaged communities. So that will be the first stream to go live. The next part will be working with the FE colleges to look at vocational boosters for adults who are already in education but lacking numeracy skills, and making sure that they have the right skills for the workplace when they enter. And then the next package, hopefully out the door, will be the business training, and that will be commissioned via open and competitive tendering. So lots of work to get this moving in really short timescales. I think we've been really clear about this. We really welcome the investment in numeracy. It's a problem nationally. It's certainly a problem in West Yorkshire. It would be great if the timescales weren't so challenging in terms of financial spend for year 1. But we're having really positive discussions and really supportive discussions with providers and with stakeholders about the opportunity that it provides. So it's all go to get things moving really at this point in time. Pass back to the chair.
Thank you, Lindsay. Are there any questions to Lindsay or comments on this report, please? Sharon, please.
Charlotta, thanks very much. I think the information that you shared with us on the local partnership group was really informative, and I think the pace that you've done all this at is amazing, given the time frames. Really interested, obviously, for year 2 and 3, when you've got a little bit more time, particularly in that co-design for the residents who are hopefully going to benefit from it and who've had the opportunity to go into AEB through different route ways. Over the years, probably, certainly our customers who are in job centres have had access to all that, but somehow aren't engaging. So it'd be really great to see how that develops over the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Nav, please.
Just harking back to the last one, really, this is an idea by a minister who was there for half an hour and thought it'd be a good idea, and so we are going to work on it for the next 3 years. I think absolute thank you very much to the officers for making sense out of it and trying to get something that supplements and augments what we do rather than replace it. But I just think it's tragic nonsense that someone's pet idea gets promulgated through our system. We use it because we have to, because we're all so hard up. But really, that should be part of the pot that we can think about doing as a region and think about using it far better.
Thank you. Now, Tim, please.
Thanks, Chair. And I agree with Nav that this is prejudice as policy, which is so often the case, isn't it? Obviously, it's very sensible that we're aligned with the AEB. Can we assume that it'll also be aligned with the Local Skills Improvement Plan on that basis? Because there are longer lines of sight, as it were, that we need to keep an eye on. Yeah.
Thanks, Tim. Anybody else want to come in? Councillor Dacre, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so yeah, again, echo what people are saying about how ridiculous it is that we're effectively trying to gear up to start it this first year before you've even had a chance to, give us our programmes, authorise our grants. The only point the officers made to me about it is that they're starting to get, and I understand that you've had an enormous amount of work to do, but they're starting to fret about the business focused and building capacity part of it, and wondering where Calderdale's going to fit into all of that and what opportunity they're going to have any say in how that's worked up. So, any ideas whether you'll be going back to the constituent authorities and when that will be?
Yeah, I mean, we have a monthly meeting on AEB and now Multiply between Combined Authority and Local Authority officers. So I suppose by necessity we have focused on the ones that I've just mentioned in order to focus on those programmes to get them up to speed. But absolutely, we had a discussion on capacity building with local authority officers and FE colleges on Wednesday in terms of considering how some of that works. And part of the capacity building, second part of it, which we've not even started discussing yet, is about supporting frontline workers. It could be job centre plus advisors, could be people working in employment hubs, as to how they make a positive referral onto either Multiply or AB programmes. So absolutely, that co-design is part of how we're working. It's just that we're having to pick them off one by one to make sure we move some things quickly because of that financial imperative in year one. We've had to consider, I suppose, which things we can get to market faster and pedal on those, and then unfortunately, I suppose, work on the other bits slightly later. But co-design is absolutely part of what we're doing.
Thank you. Bill, to see you wanting to come in, please.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's appropriate, James, really, but just to ask the question if I could. We're a bit behind the eight ball with this in our region. We've had too many other things going on at one stage, but I do know there's been some really detailed discussions with the Mayor of Liverpool and Manchester, and we're talking to South Yorkshire as well about this, and I just wondered if there was any kind of coordination between the different mayors across the north, because they all seem to have got different plans, and different avenues to get rid of the money.
To invest the money.
Yes.
Certainly we, and again as MCA officers, certainly we discuss frequently and meet in different levels and formats to understand what paths we're all taking on the funding. But I suppose that is one of the features of devolution, is that we have different problems to tackle. We also have different infrastructures, different powers, I think, as Alex has alluded to, in terms of in particularly with skills. So absolutely the approaches are different in the MCAs, but that's hopefully because we're taking that evidence-based and local look at what we feel is the biggest priority for West Yorkshire on that. But we do join it up in terms of conversations, partly because it's really helpful to learn and understand what other MCAs are doing, and a lot of what the positives of Multiply are is the FE are really clear. It should be flexible, and we should learn from it, and it should be innovative. And part of that is learning from other MCAs, learning from the partnership as what is and isn't working, and making sure we improve it as we go in delivery.
Thank you, Lindsay. Does anybody else want to come in on item 8, please? I don't see anybody else wanting to come in. The recommendation is we note progress which I believe we have done, and we'll move on to item 9, please, which is the investment pipeline, and I'll ask Sonia to come in on this, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is quite a long paper covering quite a number of different interventions. So I just want to start with an overview and an update in terms of where we are on the development of those interventions, and then pick out a couple of highlights from the paper that I think the committee need to be particularly cited on. So if I could ask Josh just to put the first slide up. Which is an overview of the table, which you also have in your papers actually at 2.1, which shows the planned time scale for the interventions that will be taken forward at a high level. And you'll remember at the last committee, you asked for some of the interventions that were on that forward plan to be brought forward, including the young people interventions that are now in wave 3, medium term for development. So we've begun work on that, alongside the skills support for employers as well. So we've responded to that request to bring those forward. Also included on that list in the middle column under the skills support for employers is something that's come through quite strongly in terms of support for developing the intervention, both from businesses and universities, to support particularly SMEs with productivity, which is the Mayoral SME graduate pilot. So we've put that as a kind of sub-programme under the skills support for employers, because obviously there's a close correlation, and we want to make sure that the two interventions are closely aligned as we take those through. You'll notice on the table that there's no sort of overall financial allocations, so the committee will be aware that we have a notional allocation of £21 million of gain share funding. We've not included allocations on this table because we feel that it's probably a more sensible approach to develop what the cost would be as we're developing the business cases for each of these programmes. So the only spend that the committee has approved is the £12 million for Employment West Yorkshire, which is as part of our Wave 1 activity, which is being delivered by local authorities to support individuals with skills support towards and within work, and will commence delivery from April next year, and follow on from the existing Employment Hub activity that already takes place. Also on the table, the other intervention that has got a funding allocation against it is the green skills interventions, but this isn't from the employment and skills allocation. This is being developed under the Combined Authorities Climate Environment Action Plan and being overseen by the Climate Environment Committee. So there are 4 specific interventions that are being developed as an employment and skills portfolio under this particular piece of work, and they're detailed at 2.18 in the paper. These interventions have been developed by a range of stakeholders, including the Mayor's Green Jobs Task Force, which is a group of diverse members from business and the skills sector and young people that have come together and formed recommendations about the interventions that should be developed. We've also looked at some research that we've commissioned as a combined authority, and we plan to have a dissemination event to share the findings of that in November. So committee members will be invited to that if you're interested in finding out more. But also the consortium's Green Skills Service and in Wakefield, the Go Green curriculum that's being delivered by the council and the college together. We've also worked really closely with our local authority climate and skills leads, so we held a joint workshop a couple of weeks ago to look at the specifics of the interventions. And then the last thing that I just wanted to highlight to the committee before I hand over to Marianne, who's keen to talk to you about the digital skills interventions, which is the last line within Wave 1 and 2 of the interventions on the table there, is some principles at 2.47 in the paper that might be considered for capitalised funding in any future interventions. As this committee will be aware that the Combined Authority is not a major funder of skills capital, particularly since the devolved skills capital that last had through the growth deal is no longer there. The key sources now sit at a national level, particularly through the FE Transformation Fund. But we wanted to respond to a lot of the feedback, and we've heard some of that feedback today from colleges and training providers, that more support's needed for workforce retention, curriculum development, and especially investment in resources and equipment. So we have been able to design some propositions in some of the interventions, particularly around the FE Development Fund, which is part of the Green Skills Interventions packages. So we just wanted to air the principles with the committee today rather than seek formal agreement, so that we can be consistent in our approach as we take forward any further interventions on the pipeline. I'll just hand over to Marianne, who wants to talk about the digital skills ones.
Thank you. And I'd firstly like to take the opportunity to thank the committee for steering the digital skills plan and getting it to this point, especially the feedback from the last committee in July. It's had positive feedback from the LET board recently, and it will go to the combined authority tomorrow. So thank you very much for your guidance. So today I'd like to open a discussion about prioritising the 8 interventions that have been identified into 3 waves, and specifically would like to have your guidance on how we should prioritise them. So this is just a summary slide from the plan in its designed up form, and it covers some of the successes and progress in digital skills since 2021 across the 4 work streams. Next slide, please. Thanks. You've got this deck in your pack, so this is the evidence base from the digital skills plan. These are our challenges in each work stream that the interventions seek to solve, and I'll pull out some of the pertinent statistics as we go. Josh, would you mind speeding through to the red slide? Thank you. These are the 8 key interventions proposed by the plan. The first, I'd like to go one by one and give a bit more detail about each one. So the first one is about building the capacity of community organisations to deliver digital skills and access to those who are digitally excluded. And why? Well, 25% of adult residents of Yorkshire and Humber don't have essential digital skills for life, 4% are completely offline. And because of the close association between digital exclusion and other dimensions of inequality, there is a really urgent social and economic need to act, and the cost of living crisis is only going to exacerbate this. Secondly, develop programmes for those who can't access support elsewhere. This would be complementary to the above. It might include people who can't access community resources. Then moving on to workforce for the future. Third is to roll out a programme to help raise school-age children's digital literacy. Now, fewer than 10% of pupils take a Key Stage 4 computing qualification in West Yorkshire, and 15% of young people in the UK who have smartphones have no access to laptops or desktops. I brought that one out because all of the interventions will consider and focus on underrepresented groups. This one is no exception, bearing in mind the sort of economic state that we're in. Fourthly, attract or scale up specialist educational digital provision. Based on what Peter showed us earlier and the statistics in the plan, over 80% of all jobs currently require the minimum of basic digital skills, and digital professionals are among the occupations with the highest prevalence of skills shortage vacancies. So this one is urgent, and in order to give people opportunities for good jobs and to ensure that businesses have a pipeline of talent, this is worth considering as a priority. Again, we might want to focus on underrepresented groups in this. Then we move on to SME and third sector digital growth. We've got Business West Yorkshire and Digital Enterprise as part of this. Business West Yorkshire's name is to be confirmed. But these are really crucial because Yorkshire and Humber is the region with the lowest levels of high digital capability in England. So this needs to change, and quickly, to ensure our productivity. Now, these options are under consideration in the business pipeline overseen by the BEAC committee, and our input would be to ensure that they meet the needs of the digital skills plan as they're being developed, so it makes sense to align our timelines on that. To complement that, ensuring leadership and management training, 38% of business leaders are not confident to lead their organisation in a digital world, so that's why that's there. And finally, on simplifying the digital offer, the digital skills campaign intervention is there. Everyone here knows It's a really complicated landscape, and raising the profile of digital as a career pathway interlinks with all of the aims throughout the digital skills plan. And then the last one, mindful of the discussion that we had on AUB earlier, is to seek further devolution of digital skills provision. I've noted the comments that were made earlier on that, and I'm mindful that might impact the prioritisation of this, but essentially we know our communities and we know what works for them. Josh, thank you. So this is a proposed model of delivery, and today I'd ask for a high-level discussion about the principles of these interventions. So based on the principles, based on the evidence in the plan that you've got in your packs, and based on the evidence that Peter gave earlier, I'd like to ask you which we should prioritise. So this slide is really a starter for 10, and please could you state if you'd advise that any of these interventions should be moved around into different waves. And just to inform that, if we do reach consensus today on the model, we'll have a workshop in December to agree exactly the detail of what each intervention will look like and the timelines of those. And that'll be with committee members and with the local digital skills partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who'd like to come in on the items before us? Councillor Masterman, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think social digital inclusion is really important. It horrifies me that banks are closing down and people are being forced to go online. They don't have access to the internet for a start. They wouldn't know what to do. They have literally no idea. We have a senior citizens group who sort of train other senior citizens, and we've provided them with a small amount of funding for equipment and things like that. Everything is online now and people are not prepared for that. So I think that should be the foremost, that we look at that first. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Milton, please.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. I also think that the simplifying the digital offer should run right the way through it, right from the kickstart. I think that will encompass some of what Councillor Lynn Masterman has just said. Yeah, I think that's the one I would move to run right the way through the whole system, right from the get-go, and include third sector, SMEs, social enterprises to market the digital offer.
Thank you. Councillor Lennox, please.
Just another comment backing up expanding capacity of community organisations in providing it. In Leeds, we've got something called 100% Digital Leeds, which goes out and does some of that. But even still, there will be people who don't know that there even is help out there. So I think, as well as expanding the capacity of the organisations to deliver it, it's also reaching out further and bringing people in. And how are they going to find people? Is it going to be through? I mean, I know sometimes things are advertised in GPs. Where do you get these people, and where do you find them to help them come in and then take advantage of that support that's there? Like you say, banks, etc. I think there is an opportunity to tie that, like I say, up with maybe other public health offers and stuff like that in the city across the cities and across the region. I think it needs to be something where you are going to catch people at the right moment for them to realise that there's something that they can take advantage of.
Thank you. Alex, please.
Yeah, just on the workforce for the future, you talk about attracting and scaling up specialist educational provision around digital, and I guess harping back to what I said earlier, we are losing people in the education sector back into industry. So we would love to have more attractive, scaled up digital offers, but finding the staff that can deliver that. So I think that there again might be a piece around capacity building and making sure that the colleges and providers and institutions that do deliver that have got the staff force to do that. And then there was just a question on the SME third sector digital growth. One of the elements that we're working on our SME project is digital. So again, not to making sure that we're going out and targeting the same SMEs with the same messages to have some kind of joined up thinking. Ours is very much apprenticeships, and one would assume that in all of your offers you're going to be making references to apprenticeships, particularly around digital. So if, again, there's some alignment we can do so we're not hammering SMEs locally again.
Thank you. Bill, please.
Thanks, Chair. This is a bit like deja vu for me, really, because a number of years ago we used to have a project, a joint project with the government called Overcoming the Digital Divide, and there were hundreds of thousands of people who actually got digital skills in workplaces, around workplace learning centres, or in where there was close proximity to colleges. Deals were done through Union Learning Reps, to get people the skills. And what we found in that is that people who were terrified of pressing the wrong button, you know, so computers for the terrified was a big cost, but once they got going, they were unstoppable. You know, they really wanted to embrace the new technology and use it for all kinds of things, not just for work, because as was said, 80% of jobs now, you need some kind of digital skills, but also in their lives, you know, like, oh, I can book a train ticket, or I can get my football match ticket on my phone, you know, and all that kind of stuff, which is bringing people out and spending, contributing to the economy. And it just seems to me that we're back, you know, trying to design a new system that we already had working quite well, in that engaging people in the workforce really bumped up the numbers. And I understand, you know, there's quite a lot of difficulties in terms of engaging people in communities, particularly those who have been left behind, and there's not much appetite for learning. People are feeling dejected, but you know, some of those people are working, and to be engaged at work could actually then go back into that community and say, hey, we're doing this in the learning centre at work or at college, and let's get all signed up because I can do this now. You know, so to some people, booking a train ticket or a concert ticket or a match ticket actually brings them into that digital world, and they start learning very quickly after that. So it is a bit deja vu, but I mean, engaging in the workforce, I think, would be a priority. I would say that, but a priority for getting people engaged on the programme. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Tim, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's good to see the priority and the primacy that's being given here. What I think is also very positive is the way that we're seeing in Wave 2 that commitment to development around leadership for digital skills in SMEs and the third sector. We've just heard a lot of insight into the role that the third sector play in delivering these agendas, and I think if their leadership capacity is enhanced relatively early in this process, it will only be to the good on that social digital inclusion agenda. Marianne, if I can broaden slightly to go back to some of the points you made earlier, I was delighted, obviously, to see the Mayor's graduate scheme being given the prominence that it now is. And I do think there are some opportunities to map across, both from the digital agenda into that and obviously from the green jobs agenda. HE providers are very keen to get involved in helping to develop that scheme to the benefit of organisations more generally.
Thank you, Tim. Sharon, please.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Bill was talking about as far as in work. Job centres are starting to engage more with people who are in work, around in-work progression. We've done some trials nationally, and we're finding a lot of feedback in that area for people who are in either low-skilled, low-paid, part-time work, who are really quite comfortable on the phones, ordering, you know, train tickets or whatever, but struggle using that to actually go further, i.e. moving, progressing in work with the skills that they've got, or even swapping jobs because they're not comfortable with the recruitment methods that are out there now. So, you know, just to support that, but also just to pick up on young people who perhaps have moved away from the school, colleges, unemployed. Again, great with the telephony, great doing social media, but really struggle with applying for jobs online, having email addresses that work effectively, and just not losing sight of those young people as well, I think would be my ask.
Thank you, Sharon. Is there anybody else who would like to come in? I'll go for Milton, please.
Yeah, it's just a quick question. The strategy of rolling this out, do you have links already? What I seem to think it's either universities, colleges and those kind of institutions, and do you have the network on the ground with community-based organisations, social enterprises and various other groups like that? Even the church would be a fantastic way of introducing digital skills. They have their training, well they have their they run training inside the church, so this could be a really good way to introduce it.
Thank you.
Just a question.
Do you want to answer that question directly, please?
Yes, thank you. Yes, we do have quite good networks, but at the workshop I'm hoping to fill in some of the gaps that we've got, and if you are able to support with that, I would definitely take you up on it.
I would love to be part of that discussion and support you. Cheers.
Thank you. Councillor Dacre, please.
Thank you. So, I mean, all of it needs to be done now, really, but given that it can't and it has to be prioritised, I think all Calderdale would feel is that we'd swap workforce for the future and social digital exclusion from the developed programmes one. We'd have swapped those around and had all the digital exclusion at the beginning and pushed the workforce for the future back into wave 2. And I certainly think seeking further devolution of skills provision probably can be left till the end, because it's probably a hopeless task, and therefore you don't want to be getting diverted by that whilst we do the other things.
Thank you. Phil, do you want to come in, please?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to say a few points, just reflecting on the conversation on digital skills we've had, and I'm hearing kind of broad support, and it's obviously we're trying to straddle two things here about the social inclusion bit, but also to grow the economy, where we've got significant strengths in some of our centres on digital and high growth digital, and that's quite a hard balance to make from that comment. And the other comment I'd make is, I mean, Marianne didn't talk about it fully, but just to acknowledge that there's a lot of kind of current delivery we're building on here, both in the local authorities and the providers, and our services as well, whether that's engagement with schools, employment hub. So we kind of recognise that, but we just want to go further and do more on this, and really want to be a leading region as well as supporting everybody. And then just to say, I like Milton's idea about trying to engage in different settings, particularly churches as well as schools, and probably thinking about multi-faith there as well, and how we work with our community. So really interested in working with local authorities on that as we develop that forward, because they know their communities a bit better.
Will everything go? Sorry, Chair. Can I?
Go on, come back.
My apologies. Will everything go through the local authority this way? Does it always have to go through the local authority, or can't this kind of forum go directly and work with those organisations? I'm just a question I'm asking.
I think it's a good question, and we've got two different sources of funding to explore here. We've got SPF as well as the gain share funding, and actually if you look at the investment plan for SPF, we are talking about a grants programme for VCS, and we know that some of the outcomes that are expected in there are centred around digital, so it could be that it's direct to those communities. But I think it's important to say we've not developed this yet, we've not worked it up, so we haven't defined the routes to market, so I think that's part of the design of the programme too.
Thank you. I think my observation would be is around some of the inclusion stuff. It's a point furthest away from what we would consider traditional provision that we will actually get that engagement around that. I remember, and it was when I was quite newly elected a very, very long time ago, we had projects in our area around putting computer facilities in rugby clubs. I remember one, community centres and things like that. Not the places you'd expect to put education facilities, but that's where we thought we'd engage with people. I remember one of them, it's a time when computers are the size of sort of small suitcases, so it sort of sets it in its time, but that was a kind of a lot of the projects we did to actually get some of that, to get people to think about engaging, getting stuck in a way that people might not walk through a door of a council facility or education facility, and it's work like that that's so important. to taking it forward. And the other thing, again, from the work our union learning reps did at Leeds Council in terms of engaging staff around a lot of this work as well. We had a big thing about our cleaning staff who obviously aren't recruited on the basis of their IT skills, being able to very quickly report safety hazards in buildings that they were cleaning. Again, that was another one where we sort of saw a step forward on this. So it is, sometimes it is around, as people have said, you know, looking for those settings that we wouldn't always associate with education and skills. Bill, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Sorry to harp on about this, but I mean, that learning agreement with Leeds City Council is still in force, I think, when I checked the other day. And it was one of the best in the country, actually, so credit to the Leeds councillors. But I think one of the things I'd say with, you know, benefit of some hindsight in this is that it's great putting facilities into community centres, whether that be rugby clubs or workplace canteens or, you know, churches or mosques or whatever. It's great doing that, but you've got to have the flexible capacity to meet the demand.
Yeah.
And that's, in some reasons, that's why it failed. Not failed, but didn't reach the potential it had, because the flexibility of the people who needed those skills didn't match the provision provided by the establishment. That, you know, so that's a kind of like a bit of a guiding light, really, in terms of building something new or back up. Is you need much more flexibility when you're dealing with people who work nights or, you know, don't work at all or have got carrying responsibilities, all that kind of stuff. You know, you need to build that into the picture and make sure that you can deliver it. Otherwise, people just get turned off and leave. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Bill. Looking to Sonia and Marianne, have you got the feedback you need from us? That's great, thank you. Phil, please.
I just we had a bit of a discussion about digital skills. I just want to draw people's attention back to the points on skills capital that Sonia raised earlier, just as those principles, just making sure the committee are content and happy with what we put there.
Taking that as a
Good.
silence as a yes.
Just wanted to make sure.
Great. Thank you. If we've covered everything we need to cover on this item, that's great. Thank you, everybody. So that's the last item on the agenda. Thank you, everybody, for coming today and your input. I'll just finish by noting it's Brian's last meeting before he leaves the Combined Authority. So I'd like to thank Brian for his work on this agenda and support for all of us in our roles in here. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, colleagues.
Great, that's it. I will close the meeting. Thank you.